So, welcome to the next edition of the Rare Business Podcast. With me today, I have Gareth Jones, who is a visiting professor at IE Business School in Madrid and a fellow of the Centre for Management Development at London Business School. He's also just recently authored a new book with Rob Goffey, which is called Why Should Anyone Work Here? And that explores what it takes to create an authentic organisation. First of all, for the benefit of our listeners and readers and all people kind of assembled, can you tell me a little bit about you and a bit about the work that you do?
I'm a sociologist by training.
Okay.
So my first job was as a university lecturer at the University of East Anglia.
Okay.
But my specialism has always been the sociology of work and organisations. After 9 years at the University of East Anglia writing lots of rather turgid academic papers, which no one ever read, I went on study leave to London Business School,
Right.
where my old friend and colleague Rob Goffey was already teaching, and I loved London Business School. I sort of fell in love with it in a minute because it really was at the centre of what business was all about. And luckily for me, they offered me a job.
Oh, fantastic.
So I went to London Business School. I stayed there for 5 years. I got more interested in businesses than business schools. So I started my own business, a consulting company, which I'm still a partner of.
But that's the
Creative Management Associates.
Creative Management, yes.
And our biggest client at that time was a record company called Polygram,
Okay.
which was then the world's largest recording music company. And I got to know all of the top players there rather well. And after 2 or 3 years, they offered me a job. So I became the global HR director of Polygram, which was a life-changing experience because I'd never really had a proper job, as it were.
What do I do?
Yeah, so it was a bit scary, but wonderful, wonderful experience. And I'm still slightly in love with the music business.
My brother's a musician.
Is he? Yeah.
Signed artist and things, so he's got a new album coming out next year.
Right.
Shameless plug for my brother. Watch out this space.
Yeah. So I did that job for 5 years, and I gave it up for reasons that lots of people will empathise with. I didn't see enough of my children.
Yeah.
I spent half of the year outside the country. I lived on an aeroplane. And I just thought, I don't want to be that kind of father. So with a very, very heavy heart, and it cost me a lot of money, because 6 months after I quit, they got acquired by Universal. So
Yeah.
I would have made a lot of money by staying. Anyway, no regrets. So I left the music business, and luckily for me, British Telecom endowed a chair at Henley. So I became the Professor of Organisational Development at Henley.
Okay.
Which is something you and I should come back to. I've just had another thought. And that was a great job. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Henley was lovely.
Yeah.
Very relaxed, completely different from my music business days. And while I was at Henley, Rob and I wrote a book about culture, organisational culture, called The Character of a Corporation.
Yeah.
It was really good fun. And I probably, with hindsight, should have stayed at Henley. But then an old friend of mine, Greg Dyke, became Director General of the BBC.
Okay.
And he rang me up and said, how do you fancy turning the BBC upside down? Well, that's irresistible.
Black Americana?
Thank you. That's irresistible. So I went to the BBC as HR Director and Director of Internal Commerce. That was also interesting, but I have to say, I went to the BBC as a huge fan of the BBC. My father was in a campaign against commercial television.
Right.
I wasn't allowed to watch ITV when I was a child and all that stuff.
Very
but
good.
actually, I now think the licence fee is an indefensible model, really. It's the most regressive tax in the UK. It doesn't put you in touch with your customers.
No.
Because if they don't buy you send them to prison. I mean, it's not a healthy relationship with your customer. So I tried to do some stuff there, but I found the governance structure indefensible, really. So I stayed about 3 years, worked my nuts off. Anyway, when I left the BBC, I now divide myself between teaching, so I'm a visiting professor in Madrid.
Yeah.
I still teach a bit at London Business School as well. I'm a fellow at London Business School. Writing, and I still run the consulting company. So my time is about a third.
Okay. Perfect.
And I have to say, all of it is interesting. There's not a bit of it that I wouldn't change.
Design your own life.
Yeah.
So now you and Mr. Goffey have been at it again. You just published a new book in last month, I think it was. It came out, and it's called "Why Should Anyone Work Here?" which is a great question.
and one that probably every organisation, every manager, and every leader should sort of ask themselves about their people. But tell us a little bit about the book and how it came about and why you wrote it.
Okay. Well, a while ago, we wrote a book called Why Should Everyone Be Led by You?
Yeah.
Which has been a very successful book. And it was based on an article in Harvard Business Review, which won the McKinsey Prize, which we're both very proud of.
Fantastic.
Europeans almost never win it. One of the reasons why I think it won is it's got a good ending.
Right.
So I give the article, 7 out of 10, but it's got, the last paragraph tells you the answer. It says, if you want to be a more effective leader, be yourself more with skill. Be yourself more with skill.
I like it.
So slightly different from the American version of authenticity, which is about be yourself.
Yeah.
So you can be an authentic flonker.
Yeah.
Think Donald Trump, this is be yourself with skill. And that message, I think, has resonated very well with executives and leaders all over the world for a long time. But one rather rational response to that message has been, well, okay, Gareth, I'll be an authentic leader when I work in an authentic organisation.
Yeah.
But since I don't, since I work in this political cesspit, I'll go on being the same old sneaky person I've been for the last 20 years.
The environment drives the behaviour and so on and so forth.
So we turned the question on its head, and about 5 years ago we started to ask people, well, you tell us what an authentic organisation would look like.
Okay.
And that's what this book reports, really. It says, these are the organisations that people would like to be in. And their answers form a mnemonic, which we call dreams.
Okay.
So I'll just quickly run through.
That's the kind of 5 elements that are going to end the book. Okay.
6 elements.
6 elements. Okay.
Dreams.
Okay. Dreams.
D is difference beyond diversity.
Okay.
So it's not just how many men, how many women, how many.
It's not a numbers game.
It's not that. Is this an organisation where I can be myself?
Right.
Can I be myself in this organisation?
Yeah.
And there's a sort of critique in that chapter of the sort of tick box approach to diversity. Radical honesty. Tell me the truth before someone else does.
Yeah.
So our view is sort of in the world of WikiLeaks and Freedom of Information Act and whistleblowers, corporate secrets are over. So you might as well tell the truth before someone else does.
It's going to get found out, so one way or the other.
And there's a discussion in that chapter about how BP lost control of social media after the Gulf oil spill. I mean, BP is a great company in all kinds of ways, but the way they handled that was a case study on how not to do it. And we juxtapose that with some examples from a Danish company called Novo Nordisk and how they try and tell the truth.
Yeah.
E, extra value. So add value to me, don't exploit me.
Okay.
Now
Is that both kind of like employees and customers?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Very pertinent on the data and privacy
Right.
sort of like issue, which I'm sort of wrestling
so
with.
we've got some examples in that chapter. So we're used to that notion in elite organisations like McKinsey and Goldman Sachs and so on. So you come and join Goldman to wheel that happen to you. But we use as an example, there are two big examples of the volunteers in the London Olympics.
Right.
Many of whom had never worked before, by the way.
Right.
They had never worked before. And the HR director, a wonderful woman called Jean Tomlin, who organised the largest peacetime recruitment of volunteers in the history of the UK. It's an amazing story.
It is phenomenal. When they kitted them all out and all the uniforms and everything
And
else.
a lot of them, they got a certificate at the end of it. They got trained and qualified. It was their entry to the world of employment.
Yeah, I mean, because
And of course they made the games. We wrote a blog about it actually on hbr.org about the volunteers and how they changed the games. And McDonald's. So McDonald's gets slagged off in the States, in particular for paying low wages, and there may be some truth in that. But they also recruit large numbers of largely unskilled, undereducated young people.
Yeah.
And in a year, they give them basic numeracy, literacy, and if they're good, they'll be running a shift in a fast food restaurant. That's a phenomenal. So add value, don't exploit.
Yeah.
A, authenticity. Mean what you say and say what you mean. So we've got lots of examples in there about that, but New York Life is a good one.
Authenticity is one of those kind of like terms though, however, it gets kind of thrown around right now, and people go, authentic leadership, and there's people trying to be authentic, so they're trying to learn how to be authentic, and they feel like sometimes you can't really learn how to do it. You just have to do it. And almost like do it in almost an open and honest kind of way, but almost.
Well, that's where the with skill bit comes in.
Right.
You see, because being an authentic prick is not a good recipe for.
But do you know what I mean? There's some people that's going to go, and there's all this kind of rubbing of hands. What it is to be kind of authentic.
We've got another paper which we haven't written yet about how the debate about authenticity is sort of slightly split. So the American version, the true north version, if you like, is all about be yourself.
Yeah.
Whereas the sort of European version, particularly the sociological version of authenticity, says this is about context. So, for example, you're married?
Yes.
Have you got kids?
No.
No, right. But your behaviour as an author is not the same as your behaviour as a husband.
No.
Right? Now,
it's reasonably consistent.
It doesn't mean you're inauthentic
because
you behave differently. You don't go home to your wife and say, darling, the time's come for your annual appraisal, do you? If I said that to my wife, I'd still be in intensive care.
Yeah, yes.
Right?
You speak to different people in different ways depending on kind of the context.
Whereas, so being authentic is not about being the same all the time.
No.
Now, if I knew you really well, I could identify Adrian the husband, Adrian the author, Adrian the climber. There would be a consistency in your role performances, but you don't behave the same way with your climbing buddies as you do with your publisher.
No.
And why would you?
No.
It would be stupid to do that.
No, exactly. Exactly.
So authenticity, I think, has become slightly diluted. So there's quite a long debate in that chapter about what authenticity means.
Okay.
And we have some tests of authenticity.
Okay.
So
because then throughout the book there's a lot of diagnostic sort of stuff as well.
Yes, yeah. There's the Oxford English Dictionary defines authenticity as of undisputed origins.
Interesting.
So, one thing is about knowing who you are and where you come from.
Yeah.
So New York Life is a good example in the book.
Yeah.
And after the crash in 2008, their strapline, but it's much more than a strapline, is built for times like this. It's a mutual company, by the way.
Yeah.
There's a lovely story in the book about a guy who takes out a life insurance policy. He's at his desk about to sign the policy, and he has a heart attack, and he dies. And New York Life pay out the policy.
And the owner of the policy. I mean, but
they
that's...
honour the policy. But we talk about BMW.
Yeah.
So, if you stop a BMW executive at their head office in Munich and you say, excuse me, can you tell me what BMW is all about? They sort of look at you strangely and say, the ultimate driving experience. And it's not a strapline, it's not a marketing line. It's like, what do you mean?
Yeah. Well, I'm a BMW driver.
Oh, me too.
And then a really good friend of mine who's owns a business kind of here locally, but is also a sort of climber, really good guy. And he and his wife bought an Audi S-Line sort of thing. So I've got my BMW is quite old, but it's still a solid car. I don't drive it enough to merit kind of getting a new one. So why would I have birds come along and mess all over it and leave it by the sea, as it were? And we were away on a trip, and I've always liked driving my car because I just like driving my car. It's like a M Sport sort of thing. And he was like, oh yeah, no, I do S-Line, and then we were on this trip and he kind of drove my car and he was like, oh, now I understand.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I didn't like to say, but then now I understand it from a BMW perspective.
Just move that for a second. I'll just read you. When we finished the book, all our books always end rather miserably, and because we sort of say how difficult all of this is, and of course the Americans don't ever want you to end books like that. So we went back to all our research and we pulled out some quotations from people. So this is one I really like. This is from somebody who runs a department at Waitrose.
Right.
It says, I'm proud of our supermarket and I do all I can to make sure that people buy the food they want. And sometimes they try something new. But this is the one you'll like. You need to do this in the German accent. But me and my colleagues work really hard to make the best cars in the world. I love watching a 6 Series roll off the line. I know someone is going to have the drive of their life. That's a BMW production worker.
Yeah.
Right? So authenticity is A, and then M is meaning. I want a meaningful job in an organisation which itself has meaning.
Yeah.
Right? And then S, probably the hardest one, is I want simple, agreed rules, not a fog of bureaucracy.
Right.
So that's streams. So in a way, the book is structured around that. So
I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, and particularly the last one, because the last one's all around. I want rules because it's like there are sort of like, I guess, principles that guide things, but not necessarily that shackle.
well, we draw a distinction between systematization, because organizations need to systematize.
Yeah.
Systematization is when you know what the rules are for, and bureaucratization is when you don't know what the rules are for.
Sure.
And of course, organizations get rule accretion and so on.
Yeah.
So when I joined the BBC, for example, I said to Greg, the Director General, there's so many rules here, Greg, that it's impossible not to break them.
Well,
There's so many rules.
It's almost like so many rules we don't know what to do.
Well, this hasn't been explored, but that's how you get the Savile abuses.
Yeah.
See, there's so many rules that no one enforced them. Because if you enforced all the rules of the BBC couldn't make any progress.
It's an interesting sort of dynamic. Do you remember the work that is it Sheena Iyengar sort of did around choice paradox?
Yes.
Around you give somebody too much kind of choice, or there are too many choices, and
Well,
actually you end up with get choice paralysis.
The sociological origins of this analysis is in the work of an American sociologist called Alvin Goldman, who talks about mock rules.
Right.
And mock rules give the powerful two kinds of power: the power to enforce the rules and the power not to.
Yeah.
Adrian, you're not allowed to take your laptop home at the weekend, okay? But I like you, so you can. So now you owe me a favour.
Yeah.
See what I mean?
Yeah.
Now that's at the root of the Savile problems.
But the thing that I'm really interested in, and because thank you for the sort of describing those 6 elements sort of across the dreams, and I mean I know from the book that it's kind of full of examples and case studies and diagnostics, so people can get a sense of kind of where they are with all of that. The thing that I'm really interested in with firms and this sort of stuff is how does it lead to improving either levels of engagement either with kind of customers or in kind of employees and better delivery of service and experience? I mean, in your sort of research and sort of speaking, when people do follow the dreams kind of mnemonic and get it right.
Well, they don't in the main, you see. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, there's lots of cases in the book.
So the dreams is like almost an aspirational.
It's an aspiration because there's not a single organisation in the book that does it all.
Okay.
There's some really positive examles, like
so
Novo
you've not
Nordisk.
found somebody?
Find someone who's done it all. So
Right.
take Novo Nordisk, which is now the 7th largest pharma company in the world's largest supplier of insulin.
Yeah.
Right? So radical honesty, brilliant.
Yeah.
Extra value, brilliant. Authenticity, brilliant. Meaning, absolutely.
Yeah.
Simple rules, really hard in a regulated business.
Yeah.
Because you've got the FDA on your case and so on. But the one they really struggle with is difference beyond diversity. Because what makes them authentic is that they're a very Danish company, even though they're now global.
Yeah.
Right? So you take the top 30 executives, 25 of them are white Danish males.
Right.
So and they know they struggle with it, by the way.
Okay.
They're aware of it.
Yes.
But in their pursuit of their authenticity, because they're a Danish company with roots in Danish culture and so on.
It's almost like it becomes a little bit...
There are trade-offs. The last chapter is about how some of these things trade off.
Well, yeah, exactly. And you know, you can't always...
do it all at once. So one of the things we urge rather practically is to say, if you measure yourself against the dreams diagnostic, don't try and do it all at once. Pick out the couple where you really think you can make some big improvements.
And is that what you would advise to people to read the book? If they were thinking about it, about where to start? It's almost like pick a couple?
Pick a couple.
Right.
And by the way, you don't have to be the chief executive of that. You could be the guy who runs the vegetable counter at Tesco.
Sure.
And you could go...
Or run your own little department somewhere and you
how
want to
do
start
I make
a fire.
this place a great place to work?
Yeah.
You know? So it's interesting, when we were writing the book, we were thinking, well, you know, one of the problems with this is for chief executives. Oh, we probably won't read it. But actually, it's not for chief executives.
Sure.
It's for the guy who runs this cafe.
Yeah, it's about and doing something.
See, look, if you think about all the cafes along Church Road, there's bloody hundreds of cafes.
Yeah.
How do you make this the place that A, people want to work at, and secondly, to your point, customers really like. So,
Because I think when
when we talk about meaning, for example, one of the things we say in the book is you'd be surprised what people find meaningful.
Oh, indeed.
So there's a wonderful book written by an American journalist called Studster Kell called Working. Wonderful, wonderful book. And he interviews a woman who guts tuna fish.
Right.
Now, in studies of work, gutting fish always comes out
Pretty low
down,
down.
right? And the woman who guts tuna fish says the guts feel like velvet in my fingers.
Okay, that's relative. That's completely
So
relative.
she found meaning in that.
Yeah.
Or I sometimes use this example. Do you drink Guinness?
Yes.
Right. What's the difference between a sort of averagely poured pint of Guinness and a carefully poured pint of Guinness from a consumer point of view?
It's no contest.
Absolutely.
It's no contest.
Right.
I mean, even to the composition of the head and everything else, it's
So
no contest.
why wouldn't you pour a pint of Guinness really well? Do you see what I mean?
Well, indeed.
You see, I think the trouble with engagement, in a way, that you've
Yeah.
described it, it's become another HR trick.
I know. I don't like the words.
No.
It's a domain, but I don't like the things that go around it.
It's like job enrichment. And,
Oh, absolutely.
You know, discretionary effort.
And meaningless. I mean, so I wrote to that point. I wrote this kind of piece that I put in my first column some time ago, which was, and the title was, "What's the difference between customer experience and the customer's experience?" Because I was kind of frustrated with the idea that so people were professionalising this thing called customer experience, and you go like, and the kind of like the flippant comment in the article was, well, if you look at them, the two things, there's literally only 4 letters and an apostrophe that's different, but actually in reality there's a country mile in terms of how people are professionalising it and how to talk about functions and purposes and processes. And then there's actually the understanding, the empathy that's involved, which kind of goes into what you need to do to deliver a good experience for a customer.
In the book about that, we talk about people going beyond their role expectations. So it's like, if you think of a retail encounter, what makes you remember a retail encounter? It's when people do a bit more than you expect.
Yeah.
So it's not saying have a nice day, Adrian, because they don't mean have a nice day.
No.
If they say, Adrian, your usual,
Yeah. Or
now you're in.
Or even if they kind of turn around and they say, I mean, an expression I really like, which is very simple, which somebody says, "I'll see you again."
Yeah. Or, just think about going to the bar going to the bar twice and then remember your name.
Yeah. Just those little things.
I used to use, when I was in the music business, I used to use a bar in Hell's Kitchen called Scruffy Duffy's. Its logo was "No thugs, no drugs," neither of which was true, by the way. And it's a real American bar, so served quickly, but. And then I went in one day, and the barman said, "There's a broad been looking for you." It's kind of like everyone's fantasy of what you want in a New York bar. There's been a broad.
It's like something out of a comic book.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
The other thing I was going to say was the idea around what meaning is. There's a great quote that I love. Comes from, it's been attributed to Alan Alda, the actor at MASH.
Oh, brilliant.
Did his commencement speech for his daughter's college, and part of it he said, "Assumptions are our windows on the world. We should wash them off every now and again so we can see the world clearly."
Sure.
Which I think is brilliant.
Very hard to do.
It's very hard to do, but just being kind of conscious about it is, because we all make assumptions about what's meaningful, what's valuable, and all these different things.
There's this is, again, to your research interest, but there's an example in the book about who buy Ducati motorbikes.
Yeah.
So the people who buy Ducati motorbikes, what do you think they do at the weekends?
They ride the motorbikes.
And what else do they do?
Probably, what do they do? Ride the motorbikes and look at kind of things that they're going to buy to go with their
They
motorbikes.
fiddle around with the engines.
Yeah.
Right? So they meet other Ducati drivers, they take their engines to pieces and put them back together again. Right?
And they look at other people going to do the same thing.
Right? So guess who knows most about engines? Ducati engines.
Ducati mechanics?
No, customers.
Of course.
So what Ducati very sensibly have done, very cleverly now, is they get their customers to help them design the next engine.
Don't do this, don't do that. That's amazing.
Right?
That's very cool.
It's really cool.
Yeah. Fantastic. Anyway,
Isn't that? I just think that's a great example. It's a bit like
it's a bit like what Harley kind of like Davidson have done with their kind of community and stuff as well.
So, one of the reasons why we sort of Novo Nordisk comes out very well in the book is this is Novo Nordisk's view. Who understands diabetes the best? Diabetics.
Yeah.
So
they live it.
They go to the diabetic and they ask a simple question: how can we make your life more tolerable? Now, now that doesn't sound very radical, does it? But who do most pharma companies talk to?
Doctors, and
health professionals,
medical sales reps, and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. So it's about building a sense of community with the end user.
Oh, well, indeed, and it's not radical, but it's like one of those things. Was it common sense? It's not that common. Well, and sometimes it's harder to do because you get caught up in the whole.
That's why there's a sort of. It's not a subtext in the book because we try and confront it. But if you take dreams, and you take the opposite of dreams. So you want to work in an organisation where you can't be yourself. People tell lies to you. You get exploited. People don't mean what they say. Your work's meaningless, and you're in a fog of bureaucracy.
Maybe you should come up with a mnemonic which is nightmares, and then figure out what all this kind of means.
So why is it so hard to find dreams organisations? And the answer to that is complex but sociological, I think. One, the modern form of capitalism, with its obsession with quarterly reporting and short-termism and so on. And a completely screwed up governance system. And the other is the inexorable rise of bureaucracies, as predicted by Max Weber. So the reason why dreams is an aspiration, not a description, is we're fighting against that.
Yeah.
So when Paul Polman took over as chief exec of Unilever, after a while, he said, I'm not going to do quarterly reporting anymore.
I thought that was heroic. I thought it was...
Share price dropped 7% the next day.
Yeah.
Now, was it a good call? It was a brilliant call.
It gives them latitude and kind of like space to do kind of like the things, and it gives them an opportunity to make a clear statement. Though, like, we're on this kind of journey. You're in, or you're not.
He's trying to double the size of the company while halving its carbon footprint. Well, you can't report on that every 3 months.
No.
I did some work in Chicago a little while ago with GE Healthcare. Now, as part of GE, it's a relatively small business, $17 billion business, right? They are competing with Philips and Siemens at the top end.
Yeah.
But they're caught up in this GE quarterly reporting cycle. Well, you can't build an MRI scanner to rival Siemens.
Well, the R&D kind of like cycle is kind of
years.
Yeah.
So you've got all these really clever people in the room, brilliant, clever people doing wonderful things that are going to transform global healthcare, actually. So remote scanners, for example. Remote scanners. So you can be in rural Pakistan, someone's got a remote scanner, they, through wireless technology, send the results back to the doctor in Lahore who can analyse it. They're brilliant stuff.
Yeah.
But they have to report every 3 months. It's
Yeah.
crazy. So the reason why dreams is an aspiration, not a description, is to do with the modern form of that. And by the way, I think our view very much is if you think the crisis of 2008 is over, you're mad.
Yeah. So it's an aspiration, but it's also a challenge, I guess, as well.
It's a challenge because we're saying to people, if you build organisations like this, you will become a beacon for talent.
Yeah.
So, and by the way, there's quite a lot of evidence that talented people don't want to work in organisations anymore. In a way, you and I are evidence of this.
Indeed.
If I said to you, do you want to go and work for Marks and Spencer's? What would you say?
No, thank you.
No, thank you.
On my terms, perhaps.
Yeah.
Which means
I might do a couple of days a week.
Yeah, I'm not clocking in and clocking out.
Right? So, unless organisations fix this,
Yeah.
they've got a big problem. Even Goldman's, who for years have been able to say with some justice, we recruit the brightest and the best. Goldman's will tell you, off the record now, we don't. The brightest and the best don't want to go to Goldman Sachs.
Yeah.
They want to work for app companies, they want to start their own little company, they want to work for social enterprises.
I know a young man who he's now working for one of the big consultancy groups, that big strategy houses, and he knows he's kind of there, and I've had exchanged kind of messages with him, and he's like working hard, learning a lot. Kind of some of it's great, some of it's kind of boring, but I want to work for a startup. I'm doing this to get the experience, and then I'm going to work for a startup. He said, like, that's what I want to do. And yes, there is a I wouldn't call it a crisis of talent, but there's this kind of there's a bigger conversation that needs to happen with organisations and the people around it.
My middle daughter works for IBM.
Right.
So she's a bright girl. She got her first in economics. So when she got a job with IBM, I said, well done, Gemma, fantastic. I didn't stay at IBM. No way.
No.
She's been seconded into a startup now, a spin-off from Warwick University Science Park. But I give her another year or so, and she'll find a couple of people and she'll do a startup herself.
Fantastic. So anyway, I'm just conscious of time and stuff. Anything else that you'd like to add about the book before I ask you my final question that I always ask kind of people, which I'm pretty sure I know the answer to, but
anything else I'd like to add? Well, I would say that it's one of the nicest things that people said about Why Should Everyone Be Led By You is that it's about complex ideas written simply, which is exactly what we're trying to do. And a few of people whose opinions I really respect have read this book, and they've said exactly the same. They've said it's very challenging, but it's expressed in language that we can kind of get our heads around, and each chapter ends with some fairly pragmatic advice about what can you do now.
yeah.
You know, what can you do to stop the development of bureaucracy? How can you make sure you stay true to your roots?
Yeah.
So I hope there's lots of practical things. I don't have any objection to the word tips myself.
No.
I think when you're trying to learn something, it's like when you learn to climb. Tips are really helpful.
But it's all about kind of getting started. It's
sure.
about breaking that inertia.
And then you'll find your own way.
Exactly.
Once you start to think about dreams, you will find ways in which you can add value to people. You will find ways in which you can make work more meaningful. We talk a lot about connections. Mm-hmm. So connect people to other people's work, connect them to the wider community, connect them to customers.
Sure.
So hopefully there's a mixture of what you might call a slightly daunting challenge, plus some practical, pragmatic things that you can do now.
So, thank you for that. So, you're possibly going to be in the danger of repeating yourself. But my last question, I always ask these things, is there anything that you'd like to shamelessly plug?
Well, here's a thought: whether you like it or not, you will spend the bulk of your waking life at work. It better be a place where you can be yourself. Because if it isn't, you'll lose yourself. Mm-hmm. Well, if you look at engagement scores globally, they're appalling.
Yeah. Indeed. Well, thank you for that. Gareth, thank you.
Great.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, a pleasure. Really nice to meet you.